6,400. It's kind of scary, but you know what? It is what it is. No sweat. Wow. Hi, I'm Nick, and welcome to my shop. Okay, so we got the Hemi back on the dyno. This one belongs to Mike's daughter, Jules, from a 66 Coronet that they've had for 50 years. This engine was last built in 1972. So now the car was brought here to me, and they told me, Nick, you got exhaust things to do, put a power steering on it, put a dual reservoir, and at the same time, take the engine out of the car and put it on the dyno. We did. We called in Mike. Mike came in from New York, sat with me. We had the engine on the dyno, and we did a few tests.
That's a radical.
Here we go, Mike.
Radical.
So we had it running, and we did it in the very low 400 horsepower range. But you know, we wanted to take it to a higher RPM, like 6,000 RPM. And I was telling Mike, you want to take it at 6,000 RPM? Those springs, those valve springs could be weak. We might take a chance, and you know, I don't want to break anything. But Mike said, you know what, we'll make one test and see how it goes. So we did make a test. We brought it up to 6,000, and we had some misfire. So I figured the valve springs are weak, or maybe there's something wrong with the distributor. I'm not so sure. So this is what we did. We stopped, and then we did a video on an engine tear down. So we took the heads off. I noticed that the valve springs and the retainers, they were aluminum retainers, and the valve springs were very, very weak. They didn't even have 100 pounds. Factory should be at least 120 seat pressure. We had about 85 pounds on them, 80, 85, maybe 80. And at the same time, when I looked at the valve springs, I was a good thing we don't want to keep revving it at 6,000. Look what I found. We found a broken valve spring. Here you go, right here. A broken valve spring. So what I did is I replaced the 16 valve springs. I put on steel retainers and 16 new valve seals, and I did a valve job. And that was it. That's all I was supposed to do. And maybe I had to fix the carburetor for the secondaries to open up. Then I decided to put the engine back on the dyno. I wanted to try and see if this thing could rev up. But I realized after I put the engine on the dyno, I was warming it up to test the valve springs. This is not on video. This is one night I stayed here doing it. I was warming it up, and I noticed on idle, hot oil, I only had 15, 20 pounds of pressure. And I didn't like it. So then I said, you know what? Let me check something out. And I was hearing a little noise underneath the oil pan area. Then I said, you know what? Let me take out the spark plugs, take a wrench of 1 1/4 inch, and see if I can turn the crank. I figured maybe I spun a bearing. I'm not sure. Don't forget, it's an old engine. It's got low oil pressure. We found a broken valve spring. They were weak. So this is what I did. I took the wrench. I went to turn the crankshaft. It was pretty hard. Why? I'll tell you why. The last 2 back connector rods spun bearings right here. Look at this. So what happened here is that we found our broken valve spring. The bearing spun a bearing on the connector rods. That is the reason why we lost oil pressure. So what I did is I took out the crank. I had the two rods resized. I put on new bearings. I put a new rear seal on the crank that was leaking in the first place, and I put it back in. Now we got it right here, back in the dyno. Now I want to check the valve springs. I want to check the oil pressure on idle and see how it goes. You know, we're not looking for power here. We just want to make it drive. It's a cruising car. You know, they don't want to go racing with it. That was back in the era. So I just want to make sure there's no oil leaks, there's good oil pressure, and if we could rev it to 6 grand without any issues. Now, instead of using his dual point distributor, which I believe there was misfiring, I'm using mine temporarily right here, the electronic, to see how it goes. Because I want to make sure it goes to 6,000, no problem. You know, I want to make sure my valve springs are correct, which I'm sure they are. It is a solid lifter, flat tappet camshaft. And again, we're going with the exhaust models, as you can see here. Right now, we got the valve springs, we got new bearings. Let's warm it up and try it out. You guys ready? Okay, here we go, warm it up. My biggest concern is when it gets hot, I want to make sure the oil pressure stays above 30 pounds of oil pressure. The timing set up from the last test when we had the first time on the dyno. We believe we had 34, 33 degrees, but we're going to do a few tests and we'll see. You know, it's not a high compression engine. It's got about 155, 160 cylinder pressure. Like I said earlier, it did not come here to get overhauled. Just check it out, do upkeeping, just to get it back in the car and get it running. After all, they're not going to go racing with it. They're just going to cruise with it. Oil pressure looks good. I want to see when it warms up. Well, you know, after a few tests, we're going to see that the oil gets hot. You know, I sure love these Hemis. I grew up with them, and of all these years working with Hemis, I've always had a Hemi in front of me. If it's mine, personal, my clients, my friends, no matter what, I've always had a Hemi, a 426 Hemi in my shop. And of course, lately I've always had them on the dyno. Right now in my shop, I've got 6 Hemis, a couple of 528s, one 572, and a few 426s. Here we got factory connecting rods, those big, heavy forged connector rods. Of course, now we got all new bearings. We had the crankshaft cut undersize, and of course we had a new pump installed in the first place, and a factory oil pan with the window tray. I'm running 10W30 motor oil. Oil pressure looking good so far. I just want to really warm it up. We'll make a couple of tests till 6,000 RPM. We'll see how it goes if there's no misfire at 6,000 RPM. And then get the oil nice and hot so I can see an idle at 900 RPM what oil pressure we're going to get. 950, 100. Actually 950 RPMs on idle. I do not have the oil temperature gauge on it, but it doesn't matter. I'm going to know even without the gauge. You know, we're going to make about 3-4 tests and we're going to see. And you know, after 2-3 tests, the oil gets about close to 180, 190, 200 degrees Fahrenheit. We have the 2.5-inch pipe going directly into a 6-inch pipe, so it's going to be a little bit loud. Some of the exhaust is coming back in the room. Like I said earlier, we're not looking for performance, just want to make sure the engine runs properly. Oil pressure so far looking good at 1,000 RPM. Let's make a blast right now till 6,000 RPM. Really heat up the block or heat soak the block and see how the oil pressure is at idle. Here we go. We're going to take it to 6,000 RPM and we're going to start at 3,200. Okay, here we go. Okay, let it warm up. I want to check the oil pressure and let's see what kind of power it made. Like I'm heat. I just want to heat soak the block and here we go so far. Not bad. We still have to go at a higher RPM. It went to 6,000, no problem. It's going to be hard for me to make this thing idle because the distributor backs up on the timing and the cam we have in this engine, or should I say the cam that came with this engine, there's hardly any vacuum. There's 10 inches of vacuum on idle, so the vacuum will not work on this distributor. But I don't care about the idle right now, which I'm going to go back with his dew point distributor that had an idle because it has a mechanical advance with a dew point. But the problem with his distributor, I believe at 6,000 it misfires, but I'm not going to go there. I want to see full throttle with my distributor, no misfire, so I can check the valve springs and also at the same time max out the power. And let's see where we got on our first test right here. We're still making horsepower at 6,000 RPM. Here, let's check the graph. There you go, it's still climbing. There we go. Look at that. Christ, we gotta go higher than 6,000 RPM. Shall we? You know what? I'm gonna gamble. I'm gonna take it to 6,300 RPM. Because look, if you guys look at 6,000 RPM, we're still climbing. You know, for a low compression engine, that's not bad. 450 horsepower at 6,000. Okay, we don't have crazy torque numbers. We're at 430 foot-pounds of torque at 4,700 RPM. So you know what? Air-fuel ratio is not bad. So now, do I want to go to 6,300 RPM? You know what? They are big, heavy-duty connecting rods. A lot of people tell me the weak link on a Hemi is the heavy rod that gets thrown around. Here we are at 6,000 RPM. But you know, I remember in the street racing with my brother and I with the Hemi Cuda back in the 70s, we used to rev to 7 grand with the factory connecting rods. So in that case, I'll take this to 6,300 RPM and hopefully it goes good because I like to see what it's gonna do. We're stuck at 6,000 and it's still climbing, so I'm gonna gamble. Let's hope it goes well. Here we go. I'm going to take another chance, start her up. Want to make sure that there's no noise in the engine. Oil pressure looks good. At 6,000 RPM went smooth, so I think we're good. Here, I'll take it to 6,000 right now. 6,003, I should say. Well, now, is Jules going to drive that car at 6,400 RPM? I'm not so sure. So we're going to take it at 6,400 RPM. Maybe this one shot, that will heat up the oil pretty good. And of course, then I want to see the tuning, the timing with this carburetors is it's going to be a little bit of work for me. But you know, like I said, I'm just filming here today, checking the oil pressure and what I can max out on horsepower. Here we go. Get some fresh air in the dyno room. And here we go. 6,400. It's kind of scary, but you know what? It is what it is. Sweat. Wow. Hey, we're not bad. Okay, 6,100 RPM, that's where it comes in. But before we go there, let me get it to idle. I want to check my oil pressure on idle. Here we go. Check it out. We're above 30 pounds of pressure on idle. That's exactly what I wanted. If I could get that idle to work. Here we go. No leak in the rear seal. Oh, that's a drain plug. That's a drain plug, doesn't matter. So far, so good. Is good. There's that humble idle. It looks like it's, I believe the timing is good there. You know, maybe I'll back it up a couple of degrees because they did some tests earlier on the first test that more advanced, they didn't make any power. But my concern is right here. Look. There's the RPM, there's the oil pressure. I got no noises on the crank from what I hear. Looking good. They made some decent power. It is an old engine. All I did was a valve job and the bearings on the crank. And look what we got. And looking pretty good. We maxed it out at 453 at 6,100 RPM. Oil pressure is good all the way up there, so that's good. We got a factory oil pan, factory high pressure oil pump from Melling. That's all we need. And the graph, oh, let's check the graph. Here we go. I like the torque numbers. I believe it is 440. Torque on a factory stock Hemi is 490, but like I said, it's an old engine. It's got, you know, it's got piston rings from back then. So we maxed it out at 6,400 RPM. So the engine went smooth, no misfire. Oil pressure is good all the way across. And the only thing I want to do right now is just back up the timing a couple of degrees. Because I know if I go any further, I'm just going to back it up 2 degrees, make one more test, and that's it. Like I said, then I got to work on the distributor to get the idle. But right now, like I said earlier, I want to make sure it revs, oil pressure is good, then I'll do the rest later. It's an old engine. I did a valve job. True. I didn't plane the heads or anything like that. I didn't change no pistons or any rings. All I did is cut down the crank, put all new bearings on the mains and the rods, and that's it. The engine has about 155, 160 cylinder pressure. I left it the way it is. Like I said earlier, it did not come here for a rebuild. Air fuel ratio is about 12.6, 12.7. I'm not going to bother with the carburetors. The only thing I know is right now the distributor, if Mike wants to go with electronic. But then again, I got to fix it because this engine, with the cam it has hardly any vacuum for the distributor to work with it. So I'm going to end up putting back his distributor to see what I can do later on. But right now, I'm proud with it. I got no rear seal leaking. Oil pressure is good. It revs up to 64, no problem. And now just backed it up, the timing a couple degrees to see if it makes any more power, and we'll take it from there. Here we go. Better. Just even better. Okay. Let me just listen to the engine. I'll be right back. Just got to fix the idle later on. I want to check the oil pressure. Okay, here we go. Hey, we did not bad. Didn't change the torque, didn't change at all. We're still at 440 foot-pounds of torque at 4,600 RPM. But the horsepower increased, went up to 455 at 6,000 RPM. Wow. That's cool. Torque didn't change, so if I retard the timing a bit more, I doubt it. I really doubt it. If the more I retard the timing, the less of an idle I get. Okay, but the vacuum, I have it connected on the distributor, but it's not working with the low vacuum. Like I said, we're not looking for power. It doesn't matter. I'm looking at oil pressure. Let me look at the graph. Looks pretty good. There it is. I think I'm going to leave it where it is. I'm going to maybe play with the timing when it's in the car with the other distributor. I'm not sure. But you know what? I'm going to just start it one more time. I want to get it to idle about 950. I want to check the oil pressure because now the oil is really hot. And before I turn it down, let's see what we got. Here we go. After all, I changed the bearings for this reason. Here we go. So this is what I want to see, the oil pressure on idle. Shut the fan, George. You know what? I'm going to leave it where it is. It's in a retirement mode anyways. So my job is to put it back in the car. So here we have the 66 Hemi Coronet, the original Hemi car that belongs to Jules. And I'm also overhauling the transmission. So by the time I put the engine back in the car, fix the idle, I want to also put the transmission in. And of course, I'm going to put a complete new exhaust system with the cutouts. And there you have it, guys, right here. Dark, deep purple. That belongs to Jules from Texas. Here we are, a couple of days later, taking the engine off the dyno, and now, Jules, this is your engine. We're going to put it back in the car, and of course, I've got the transmission overhauled, which I'm going to put later on. But in the meantime, I'm here today, and let's put it in. I also wanted to say that while the engine was out of the car, we had to replace the proportioning valve and the master cylinder. We went with a dual reservoir master cylinder, and also we had the steering column and the steering box replaced so we could put power steering in the car, because this car is manual brakes, 4 drums, and of course manual steering. So we wanted some comforts of life. Jules wanted us to install power steering, so we got a pump, steering box, steering column, and everything. But of course, it's much easier putting it in before we put the engine in the car. So all that is done, and now I'm ready to install the engine. This is an original 66 Hemi Coronet. This is the original color. And I just wanted to say, you know, it's got the patina look. I wanted to keep it that way, you know. I did some upgrades on a couple of things, but I didn't want to make it too much detail, but it's not here to be detailed. So I wanted to keep some of that patina look. Left it like that. We do no painting on it whatsoever. And the way the engine looks, it's going to match the engine bay. This is my best part, just dropping the engine in the car. So let's get started. It's always a special moment every time I install an engine in a car. It means it's the finishing touch. Now, weather permitting, I like to take it for a drive, but right now I don't know yet. I still have to put it together, get it running, do some carburetor work, make it idle. I want to put his distributor back on, fix it good, and the perfect part about it is that you make room for another client, and that's a very important goal for me. We have a few new clients coming in. One of them is going to be a 68 Barracuda from California. Another one's going to be a 71 Hemi Cuda from Long Island, New York. And then in a month or so, we might have a double Cuda coming in from Michigan. And maybe from Nebraska, a 66 T-Bird. So we're going to see. And yes, we got to finish our projects, cars, whatever we're doing. I'm still waiting for a few pieces on a few cars here, which some parts came in this morning, which is good news for tomorrow. So when Robert comes in tomorrow, he can start tackling on the other cars. I'll be working on this one. So every moment counts. You know, I just want to say we work here late on nights. Manny comes here, works late on night with us. If you got so many cars and a small team, we do the best we can. So that's what we're here for. another Hemi back home again in its rightful place. There you have it. So I'm going to spend the next day or so tying it up, putting it together, put the transmission back in place. But then we have to send that out and get the whole exhaust system done with cutouts. So when all that's done, as hopefully the weather turns out good, we take it for a drive. So Jules, there it is, back in the engine bay. There you have it. And you guys, if you look down below the video, we have a whole bunch of merchandise that you guys can buy. So whatever you like, buy it, love it, wear it, and enjoy it. And help spread the word of Mixed Garage. And if you have some time, check out our Patreon page. We have extra content and you guys can watch it and take it from there. And we'll see you next time.